welcome back. This is Donna with ABC Cake Decorating and Baking Supplies. Here we are on lesson 16. No longer a beginner. Oh, you're growing up so quickly. Now we're going to be doing intermediate flowers, and I'm going to introduce you to a new little guy in our family. It's a flower nail. Flower nails are very easy to use, however, you can make them complicated. So I'm going to show you what you need to do to make sure you keep a proper positioning with your icing bags so that we are going to be able to create these cupcakes. Our end goal is at the end of all of these lessons, we are going to be completing this garden cake with these intermediate flowers. First lesson, 16, I'm going to show you today even how to go ahead and make this Bachelor button. A Bachelor button, I'm going to go through the icing consistencies, what tips you're going to need. The more prepared you are, the easier it is for you to complete your flowers. The next lesson will be a chrysanthemum, and then we're going to continue on to do a sunflower. And then on the rose, there's actually two different roses I want to show you. The first one is a ribbon rose, which isn't quite as complicated as the petal rose is. And then we're going to be doing the carnation. Then we're going to take our filler flowers after we've learned how to put the flowers on our cake. Take our filler flowers, fill in any voids that we need to fill in. And then what you've learned, we're going to take our leaves and we're going to also take some of our ferns and we're going to apply that to this to kind of just give it that little bit more advanced look to your cakes. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we need is a flower nail. Flower nails, there's many different shapes and sizes. This is considered a 9/13. It's basically a standard one. It's the medium size round one. They have little ones, they have larger ones. This is a medium size. This is the one you're probably going to use the most in making most of your flowers. This carnation, I made a larger one, and we'll get into that a little bit further. I'm just so excited. There's so much to learn. So, first thing, how do I hold a flower nail? What you want to do is you want to take the flower nail and right in the crease where your knuckle is, you want to place it right there and then take your thumb. And the main thing is you want the flower nail to move away from you. So in order for it to move away from you, if you always think it needs to go to the end of my finger, so the icing will be coming towards you and the nail's going to be going away from you. So if you're right-handed, you're going to hold it in your left hand and you're going to turn it counterclockwise. Sometimes my students get confused and they'll start going backwards. If you need to, I draw little arrows. That way there, I know which way my flower nail needs to go. Likewise, if you're left-handed, you're going to hold it in your right hand. Same positioning, it's going to go right in the crease of your knuckle with your thumb, but you're going to go the opposite way. You're going to go clockwise, okay? So that is one of the things. So you might want to even just practice taking the flower nail, holding it, and just practice turning it, okay? And once you get to the end, just stop, and a lot of times I'll come back, just put it right back in the proper position, and I'll continue. Sometimes I'll stop, and I'll just roll it back, and then I'll continue on. So you'll see all this as we get more into it. One of the things I like to do is if I'm not piping right on a cupcake, because the cupcake you can use as a flower nail too. You just hold it and you turn it the same way. I like to take a piece of parchment paper or wax paper and I want to put it on top of my flower nail. That way there I can take, and if I'm going to do all of these flowers, I can just remove it, and if I'm in a hurry for it, I'll stick it in my freezer, let it get nice and hard, and then I have a nice solid flower that I can place on my cake. So what I want to do first is I want to take a little bit of icing. Now to make this Bachelor button, we are going to be using 3 tips. We're going to be using a tip number 1, a tip number 5, and a tip number 16. A 1 and a 5 are both plain tips. so that you can see that they're just round. And our tip 16 is going to be our star tip. So for this application, I've got 2 different colors, and I'm going to start out with tip 5. And I want to very first take and put a little bit of icing down on my flower nail. Reason being is that's going to hold my paper so that I can pipe my flower. Then when I'm done, I can easily remove it. When we were learning how to do this, we were using glue sticks. Don't do that, because sometimes they don't come off. So the very first thing we want to do, and we want to start out with our Bachelor button. It's going to be a darker color. So I'm going to start out with my darker blue. What I want to do is basically make a dot or a button of icing. Because Bachelor buttons are kind of small, they're a very cute little flower. I'm going to hold my bag at 90 degrees just above the surface, and I'm going to squeeze and just make maybe like a nickel-sized dot. Okay, so now that after we've piped our blue dot, and let me remind you, we're using a medium consistency icing. So all of the icing we're using, the light blue and the dark blue, and the Bachelor button also looks pretty in a lavender and a yellow. So you can make it, this is the cool thing, when you're making your own cake, you can make them whatever color you want. Got our blue dot. Now we want to go ahead and we want to pipe in the middle part where it's a lighter color, just so you get some definition of the flower. So now we have our tip 1, and remember the positioning of our rose nail or our flower nail. If people refer to it as a rose nail, this is what they're talking about. So sometimes I say flower, sometimes I say rose, but that's what this is. Want to make sure you have it in your crease for your right-handers, in the crease on your right hand for the left-handers, just kind of opposite. We're going to be doing it straight up and down with our tip 1. We want to make some nice fine little seeds on the inside here. So what we're going to do is start in the center. We're going to squeeze, and they call it kind of a pull-out dot, because we're going to squeeze, and as we squeeze, we're just going to kind of stretch the icing out just a little bit. Now, as you notice, as I'm doing this, I'm keeping this hand in the same position. What is moving is the flower nail. That way there, I've got my proper positioning. So we're going to squeeze, lift, and I'm turning it towards my fingertip. Squeeze and lift, squeeze and lift. And this is all we're doing right now. We're just going to kind of fill in the middle just enough to get a little bit of a definition for when we go to start doing our stars. So see, I didn't move the flower nail very much. My positioning stayed the same, but yet I was able to turn it around so that I could get a full circle around my little dot. Now we're going to go to our tip 16, which is basically an open star. And we're going to make sure we have a nice tight grip on our bag, make sure the icing's pressured. And remember, again, I'm going to refer to this, don't overfill your bags. You don't want to stress your hands. Medium consistency icing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to squeeze, and we're going to do kind of a pull out. We want it to be about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. As we do this flower, every time we squeeze and pull, as we come up, we're gradually going to make them a little bit smaller so that we end up getting like a button, a Bachelor button. Okay, now if you notice, I'm keeping the same positioning, and all I'm doing is I'm moving the nail. I'm moving it towards my fingertip. I'm not going backwards, and I'm not changing. I'm keeping proper positioning. A lot of times what I'll do, let me set this down a second because this is important. A lot of times what I'll do, and don't be afraid, I'll take my elbow and I'll stabilize it next to my side. That way there, I always have the proper positioning. That way there, I kind of anchor it down. If I don't, I'll even find myself, and then I have to self-check. Make sure, proper positioning, okay? So, back to, here we are. I'm going to squeeze, pull out my dot. Squeeze, pull out my star, not my dot, it's a star. Pull. See, look at which way the flower nail's going. It is going counterclockwise, and it's moving towards my fingertips. This is one of the easiest flowers to learn while you're learning how to use a flower nail, because you'll be surprised. You're doing so many things at one time right now that it's all a thought process. Before long, you'll just be pumping them out. Now for the next row, when we did our very first row, we started straight out. There was no angle on this bag at all, straight out. Now we're going to angle it up just a little bit, just enough now so we can start getting our circumference on our flower. And we also want to stagger in between each of these because we don't want a row of petals. We don't want to see a line going up our flower. So we're going to go in between. We're going to come up a little bit. We're going to squeeze and see how the flower's starting to come up a little bit. And it's just a little bit shorter. We're squeezing and going right in between, and we're going to fill up that whole circle, get them nice and tight. We don't want to see any spaces. And see which direction I'm turning the flower nail. It's going counterclockwise. Again, left, clockwise. Remember, remember. Now we're going to go in and we're going to go up just a little bit more. We're going to squeeze. And we're going to turn it up just a little bit more. So now you're starting to see this flower starting to come together. We're just going to squeeze and come up, squeeze and come up. And there's no rules to how many rows you need. The main thing is you want to fill in this whole inside circle. So you can see I have some vacancies there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my starting position, come in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and come around it. Now I'm almost vertical. I'm almost at 90 degrees. And if you have to go over your center just a little bit, that's okay. And there's your Bachelor button. Now what you can do is you can take it right off your flower nail and you can put it in your freezer if you need it within the next 10 or 15 minutes. If you don't need it right away, because it is a decorator crusting buttercream, you can just set it down. And if you need it in a day or two, it'll be nice and crunchy and you can pick it up. And I'm going to show you how to place them on the flower nail. So stay tuned. We're going to be going next into our chrysanthemum. So whatever color you think you're going to want your chrysanthemum, go ahead and color your piping bag. We are going to be using a tip. You can either use a tip 12 or you can just use a plain coupler. And I'll show you how to do that. And the most important tip is going to be your tip 81. And it's going to be shaped like a U. Hope to see you then. Thank you.